Well, thank you for joining us for today's ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice Chair Chat. My name is Aracely Muñoz. I'm a council member for the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this conversation. These chats are a unique opportunity to engage directly with the key issues at the heart of our work in civil rights and social justice, explore the perspective of our expert, panelist, or speaker, and spark discussions that inspire action. Today's topic is AI in the legal workplace. More specifically, its use or lack of use among public interest lawyers and how it can impact public interest lawyering. As we look at AI in the public interest workplace, it's essential to examine how these issues intersect with the principles of justice and equity that guide the work of the ABA and many of those of you listening to this conversation. We are excited to have with us Sateesh Nori, Chief Legal Futurist at LawDroid, author, and Senior Research Fellow at NYU Law School. So without further ado, let's dive in. So Sateesh, a brief overview of where we are in the movie when it comes to the use or lack of use and adoption of AI in the legal profession writ large. Set the stage for us.
Yeah, thanks. And it's really, really great to be here with you. This is such a unique moment because, on the one hand, you have a lot of people, a lot of big organizations in the legal system embracing AI, spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, on legal tech that's powered by AI. You have thousands of new companies springing up everywhere who are promising to deliver like AI efficiencies and AI workflows and AI associates and robot lawyers and all kinds of like bells and whistles. And on the other hand, you have kind of the average public interest organization, law school clinic, pro bono unit of a law firm, court system, and they're paralyzed, I think, in many ways. They don't know whether to use AI, whether it works, is it ethical, how much does it cost, will it be a two-tiered system of justice, and so on. So it's a unique moment, probably the hype is extreme, but also the opportunity is also extreme. So where does it all end? We'll have to see.
Okay. So when folks talk about the use of, AI in the legal workplace, it's often in law firms, to your point, in
Hmm.
these big law firms that have these big sophisticated systems, or even smaller law firms that have this real, business driven necessity to adopt technologies like AI, or corporate in-house counsel where your business units are driving the use of AI. What are you seeing? And I think you kind of alluded to that in your statement just a moment ago in public interest spaces. And I want to just make sure that we situate everyone what we mean by public interest. And you again also alluded to that. We're talking about legal
Yeah.
services, we're talking about the
Hmm.
courts, we're talking about state and local governments, federal government. We're talking about legal impact organizations, legal advocacy organizations, that universe. And I'm going to exclude pro bono for now because although they
Sure.
do some of this public interest,
Yeah.
they're not 100% public interest lawyers
Yeah.
or lawyering for the community. So in that context, what are you seeing in terms of its use or adoption? And you alluded, but if you can dive in a little bit deeper
Yeah, of
to that.
course. I think in the private sector, there's a clear proposition that when you're billing by the hour and you have technology that saves time, that's a win. If something takes 50 hours to do, like writing a memo or doing a discovery project or writing a set of questions for a deposition, and it goes from 50 hours to 5 hours or 50 minutes, and you're charging by the hour, that's a huge win, right? You can reduce the time that you're spending on these tasks. You can do more tasks. You can do deeper work. You can take on new practice areas. You can really grow your firm if the basic unit of your work is faster, cheaper, and better. That's the promise of AI. In the public interest world, we're not charging anybody and we're not measuring our time by the hour or in 6 minute increments, right? The way that big law firms do. So then, how do we measure whether AI is helping us? Is it that we can serve more clients? Is it that we're getting better outcomes for our clients? Is it that we can take on new practice areas, new subject matters? Is it that we can expand our geography? We can take on additional zip codes in our cities, in our neighborhoods. How do you measure that? That's a real challenge for public interest organizations. And then you throw into that mix the fact that most people who work in public interest organizations, I'm going to go out on a limb here, are pretty progressive. They're liberal. They care about the environment. They care about jobs. They care about big tech and corporate dominance. They care about democracy. They care about whether people have a say in where things like data centers are housed, right? All of these things make using AI in the public interest world, in legal services, in legal aid, in community centers, and so on, much more complicated. It's not as simple as saying, this saves time, therefore it makes us more money. It's a lot more that you have to weigh and you have to, consider the morals and the ethics, the impact. How do you measure the effectiveness? And then there's also things like, well, are you saying that low income people don't deserve human lawyers? I hear that all the time. Are you saying that human beings who are rich get human lawyers and human beings who are poor get robot lawyers, right? Is that the question? And so if you frame it that way, obviously you would say, no, that's not the way we should look at it. We should get everyone the best legal help they can get. So it gets really complicated when you add this really novel, powerful, scary technology into a landscape where people are already afraid, they feel disempowered, they feel underfunded, they feel like they're already fighting against institutional power, big corporations, and so on. How do you make that decision about using AI? That's where we're at. And it's a really, really interesting moment because we can either work out these issues or we can say, we're not touching this stuff. It's poison. It's bad for us. It's going to prove to be bad for everyone in the long run. We can't go down this path. We're going to take a stand and do things the way we're already doing them. But if we do that, we have to accept that most people in America aren't getting legal help. That's a fact. So we've got to be okay with the status quo in which we're not helping most of the people who need and deserve our help.
There seems to be, even within public interest, a bit of a tension. Because I know we've spoken about this, and something that keeps sticking in my mind is that among legal services leadership, it sounds like there's a desire to adopt this technology,
Mhm.
but there's a tension with their line attorneys, with their supervisors. And I think in legal impact organizations, what I've seen is a reticence from leadership and from the attorneys to adopt. So both the leadership and the line attorneys don't want to adopt this. And even within this space, there is this tension of use or not use. Are you seeing the same thing, that even within public interest, there's different pockets of
Yeah, yeah.
responses?
Ironically, like the group that's most able and most willing to use technology like AI is my generation, like middle-aged people who are who remember what it was like before we had the internet in law firms, when we were faxing documents to each
Are
other.
you are we talking beeper era?
Yeah, pagers, Blackberries. We remember that stuff.
Yes.
And we remember how hard it was to do work that way and how much easier things are now. But on the other hand, we're not so much older that we are reluctant to learn a new thing. We're still nimble enough, we're still malleable enough to bring this new stuff into our workflows. On the other hand, there are the younger people who are maybe the 20 somethings, 30 somethings, who maybe they went to law school during the pandemic or college during the pandemic. And they remember how alienating technology can feel, how Zoom is the end of human interaction and the dynamism and the social aspects of collaboration. Maybe they felt alienated and isolated by Facebook when they were in high school or Instagram. And so I think the younger generation and the oldest generation both are equally or similarly against this stuff. And it's the middle-aged folks who are like, you don't remember, on the one hand, you don't remember what it was like before we had this stuff because you grew up with it. On the other hand, you don't realize how easy this stuff is to learn. You're afraid that it's going to be like learning how to use Word for the first time or learning how a website works. It's much easier than that. So we have to see how these things shake out. But who's going to be in charge of this shift? Right now, it is the older folks, right? It's the partners at the law firms, the deans of the law schools, the gray beards who are going to say, you can try this when I'm gone, but I don't want to mess with it. There's too many variables. And the younger folks are like, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for jobs, big tech is evil. We're all going to be isolated and depressed by using this stuff. It's going to take away the humanity, whatever's left of being human, and we don't want to use it. And you got to frame that all against, well, what about the need? What about the need of people to get legal help? What's more important? Or is it worth the risk of trying this stuff with the reward that we could help a lot more people, knowing that there are risks?
But how do you get past that, Jen? Because it's not
Yeah,
unreasonable for someone who's dedicated, it wouldn't be unreasonable with someone from Earth Justice, to be like, no,
of course.
we know the
Yeah,
damage it does to the environment. So
yeah,
how do you
yeah,
get past these tensions? What do you
yeah. I
see as
mean,
the path forward?
yeah. Like I use myself as an example, and I say to myself, I'm in favor of, I support the environment. I'm progressive in terms of labor issues. I'm against big tech and I believe in antitrust laws. I try to be a vegetarian. I try to ride a bike as much as I can to not hurt the environment where that is possible. And yet, I also work in a field in which the mission of my job is to help low income people with legal problems. So if that's the mission of my work, and there's a tool that helps me do that, then I'm going to try to embrace it. And I realize that there are trade offs. Everything has trade offs. So, one example I hear, and people either love this example or they hate this example, is people say to me, I'm not going to use AI because I'm not going to support data centers. And AI is kind of operated in these giant warehouses full of computers, and they're placed in low income communities. They take up a lot of water and electricity. Boo. I'm not going to support that. And I say to them, what'd you watch on Netflix yesterday? Yeah, did you like it? Guess what? It lives on a data center. Or where do you think your iPhotos get stored if they're not on your iPhone? Where do you think your Gmails live, right? Where do you think your Facebook account lives? Where do you think LinkedIn lives? They're all on data centers. So why are we hypocritical about this new technology that reveals this thing that already existed? We just didn't know about it. We didn't care about it. So let's be consistent in our values and transparent about the trade-offs that we're willing to make and focus on the mission. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, I would say, like, what's your mission? If your mission is to protect the environment, like with Earth Justice, I think it's perfectly reasonable and consistent to say, heck no, we're not using AI. It's deliberately and directly going to hurt the environment. But if your mission is to help low income people get food stamps, then using AI is going to further that mission. There's a good argument for that. Um, and so you should try it, right? Because that's your mission. But you can't have every mission on Earth and be consistent and get anything done. there are trade-offs that we have to accept. And, even going to law school, right? Like if you say, I want to do good in the world, well, going to law school is a pretty interesting choice if you're going down that path, right? Because lawyers do a lot of bad in the world. They're in charge of a lot of stuff. They make a lot of decisions in an undemocratic way that impacts a lot of people everywhere on earth. And so why even go to law school if your goal is to do good in the world, right? That's a legitimate question. So
Mhm.
point is we make decisions that have trade-offs, and this is just another one of them in a long line of decisions like this. And just choose the one that's the most consistent with your values. Maybe use a model that is better for the environment. Maybe don't use AI unless you have to, or understand how it works and how best to use it and so on.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting that you made those two examples, the food stamps and again, Earth Justice did not have
Yeah.
anything to do with my comment. It's just such an
They're a
easy
sponsor of this
example.
podcast.
It's such an easy example, but I want to just challenge that because I do think for a lot of public interest lawyers, it's all about intersectionality. It's
Hmm.
about cross movement lawyering. It's about not doing your public interest lawyering in silos. So, although on its face, yes, maybe doing AI and being able to process more quickly, food stamp applications is a good thing. And if you're doing environmental work, then you should be considered. But for a lot of these lawyers and a lot
Yeah,
of these organizations, it's about both. It's not a zero
yeah,
sum game. And
yeah,
how do you navigate that? And I think that
yeah,
is the ongoing tension that we're
yeah.
seeing. So
Hmm.
you've talked a lot of big pictures, but do you suggest any brass tactics for
Yeah,
moving forward
yeah,
with a lot of this in assessing this technology and its use?
yeah. I mean, the first thing I mentioned already is to focus on the mission. Like, what's your mission? But related to that is put yourself in the shoes of your clients. The average person, I think, who faces some kind of life issue or legal problem, the number one thing they're looking for is a solution. And they're not necessarily interested in whether the solution comes from you, the lawyer, your organization, the court, their neighbor, their cousin, somebody on TikTok. If it works, that's an improvement in their life situation. Their family's better off. Maybe they don't get evicted. Maybe their family member isn't going to face removal. Maybe their family can be reunified. Maybe they're qualified for a new benefit. If we put ourselves in the shoes of our clients and we say, what is it that they're looking for? And how do we get to that solution in the fastest, cheapest, most efficient way? I think that's a good guide star for us. But instead, if we're saying we're going to put our values ahead of our clients' needs, like we're going to put the our view of whether we should save the environment, our view of the pros and cons of working with this technology company, our political views on XYZ, is that really putting our clients first? Is that transposing our values onto our clients and making them accept our values in order to get served by us? It seems like a very fraught way to proceed. And I hear this all the time, and this is a generational issue too. It's like, no, you have to be morally pure in all of your decisions. Well, unfortunately, that's impossible as you kind of grow up and maybe you want to start a family, maybe you want to have kids. Where are your kids going to live? What are they going to eat? Where are they going to go to school? How are you going to make all these decisions and all the trade-offs that come with those decisions ethically, morally, financially, and so on, right? Um, it's too complicated. But if you focus on the clients and say, our client wants their solution, they don't want to deal with us. They don't care if we even exist. In fact, they should never have had this problem in the first place in the ideal world. So that's the way we should think about solutions is a way in which the clients get what they need, and maybe we don't even exist. We don't center ourselves and our values. We center the clients and their values. And we make trade-offs, we make decisions, we make the best of the reality of living in the world.
So when you say we don't exist, you mean in the moral compass sort of way, not in the physical way. Because I do think that
Yeah,
despite the
yeah,
fact
yeah.
that you can give clients access to this information, both of us have been in legal services. Clients still want to talk to someone because they
Of
always feel
course.
their
Yeah,
problem is unique. And sometimes it is.
yeah,
Sometimes it isn't clear
yeah.
cut. So I think that
Yeah,
when you
but
have
I
some
do mean
people,
like
go ahead.
legal aid shouldn't exist, right? The only reason we exist is
Right,
because the system is broken.
right,
Like, I don't have an entitlement to a job at legal aid.
right.
The job exists to serve people, right? It's not a jobs program for do-gooder lawyers. It exists because their system's so broken that we have no other way to enforce the laws and the rights and the privileges that are already on the books. And so anyway, that's what I mean by that is like we should like do everything we can to not exist,
Right.
not to keep existing forever and being bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes, we should move ourselves out of a job, not into a
Yeah,
job.
exactly. Yeah.
So I want to pursue because there's just one more issue that often comes up with AI, and I think this is definitely at the forefront of a lot of legal advocacy and legal impact litigation organizations do public interest work, and that is the surveillance.
Hmm.
Which, you and I have had this discussion too about surveillance and the fear of surveillance and the fact that despite, they're not going to have the budgets to do these fancy closed off systems that law
Yeah,
firms may
yeah,
have or corporations and the
yeah.
concern about legal strategy and revealing, and having worked in reproductive rights and having
Hmm.
overseen security in my office, the struggle is real. Threats are constant. So, what do you say in response to those arguments? Because that is a little bit of a tougher, and you're not always dealing in volume.
Yeah, there's one kind of argument that, again, people don't like, but here it is, which is that that ship has sailed. We already store our data on either Microsoft 365 or Google's cloud or AWS, Amazon Web Services, right? No one has physical files that they lug around back and forth to court anymore. They don't even keep the files in their office, right? They're all in the cloud. So, what does that mean? That means that we are kind of subject to surveillance, violations of privacy, security breaches, and so on. We've already kind of surrendered that fight. Now, that doesn't mean we give up. We can still insist on protections, on safeguards. We can not use client information, personally identifying information in any situation involving a third party tool. A rule of thumb that I picked up recently is the more software products are in between you and your client, the more levels of risk there are. Like if you're using Microsoft Word and it's in the cloud and you have a legal research add-on and you have Grammarly on top of that and then you copy it to your Google Drive at home and then it's also in Dropbox because you're traveling and all of those are security layers that are prone to risk. So we're already kind of in this world where like we just assume nothing bad's going to happen, but we've already given up the ghost, if you will. And so we've got to do better. In general, this isn't a new problem. The other thing I would say is lawyers think that we work in the most complicated, most intellectual field. We don't. It's not brain surgery, it's not astrophysics. We're dealing with words. We don't even need the latest or greatest versions of AI tools or any software tools, really. We're just mainly working with spreadsheets, PowerPoint, and word processing, right? And throw in a little online legal research. And so the point of that is we can use a lot of really simple, basic, highly secure tools that are local, that cost less, and we'll be fine. But that's not what they try to sell us, right? They try to sell us the latest and greatest, fastest, meanest, most cutting edge AI tech. And we fall for it, but we don't need to. And so part of it is just being educated that we don't need that crazy stuff. Like we can use the basic version that's the most secure, that's the simplest, easiest to use, easiest to maintain, cheapest, probably also best for the environment because you're not wasting energy and tokens in making it work. So there are ways to use this stuff for exactly what we need to gain all the benefits and minimize the risks. And we're just not doing that because there isn't enough information. There aren't enough tech products where people are honest with us about what we need. And that's just true for, any industry where they're trying to sell you something that's new. Is they're going to be like, you need this greatest and latest thing.
Mhm.
Um, Take, for example, like we all probably have a laptop. Um, we don't need the latest iPhone, the latest MacBook, right? For the legal work that we're doing. We're not programming, we're not creating models of weather patterns to predict tornadoes or studying X-rays. We're just writing documents. And so, like, I think we can do ourselves a big favor and use stuff that's cheap, that's easy, that's secure. And that means like locally stored AI models um, that protect your data, that use less resources, and so on.
So I want to pivot a little bit because we've now talked about what's out there, the way to approach what's out there, and what is the argument, and a way to do it that may be in line with your public interest values, whatever your organization does in the public interest.
Mhm,
What is the goal? Because we hear, and I want to go back, I really don't want to talk
mhm.
about law firms. I'm going to use that as the example. We hear in the
Yeah.
law firm context, it'll help you be the lawyer you want to be. It'll help free you up to
Mhm.
do more pro bono work, make more money, all that other wonderful stuff. But what would it mean for public interest lawyers, in addition to, because we've already talked about this, being able in public, for example, in legal services to serve more clients? But for other
Yeah.
types of organizations, or for even those lawyers within public interest, aside from serving more clients, which is important and critical, what else, what is the argument for this adoption? What would it
Yeah.
free lawyers? I think I've heard you use the phrase something like be the
The
lawyer you
analog
always
lawyer.
dreamed of being.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
what does that
I
mean?
think, yeah, this is something I've been talking and thinking about a lot more recently because I think, personally, I'm sick and tired of making the argument that AI works for legal work. I think that's settled. Like, we don't need to talk about that anymore. It's pretty clear that it does. But what does it mean for us? And I think what it means is, well, think about the average public interest lawyer and their journey. At some point in college or maybe earlier, they thought, I want to be a lawyer. And they thought to themselves, I want to be the type of lawyer that helps a vulnerable person. I want to stand up for a cause that maybe is unpopular, but really important. I want to fight for basic values like democracy, free speech, the right to privacy, the right to healthcare, the right to an education, the right to housing. And then you think about what would that work be? And when I was thinking about going to law school, I thought I'd go to court and I'd stand beside someone and I'd understand and learn about their life and their problems, and I'd be able to make that argument that they couldn't make on their own. And then we'd like walk hand in hand out of the courthouse, win or lose, we were there together, and that was, the reward. But when I started working in public interest law, that wasn't the reality. The reality was most of my days were spent in front of a screen doing email, returning phone calls, trying to contact people who worked in government agencies, scheduling meetings and court dates. And then rarely did I have that like spark of that essence of doing that human thing as a lawyer that I imagined. Well, now we can do that again, I think. Like if we actually utilize AI to its fullest capacity, it can actually free us from our screens. We don't have to sit in front of our phones, our laptops, our iPads all day long. We can be in the community. We can stand with real people. We can hear about their issues and their problems. We can meet their neighbors. We can organize people. We can go to court. We can argue. We can negotiate. Maybe we can go to state legislatures and run for office and make better laws and support our democracy. All of these things that lawyers probably should have already been doing. But for 50 or more years, we literally became robots, right? Most lawyers never see the light of day. They're in, windowless offices looking through documents, staring at blue screens all day long. So I think the promise of this stuff is for public interest lawyers, especially, you can be that type of lawyer that you dreamed you would be instead of the lawyer that you actually are, which is just some kind of, you know, person doing the drudgery of paperwork and emails and correspondence, writing that same motion for the 100th time, um, and so on. Like, let's actually get back to the humanity of lawyering, and we can do that, hopefully.
Mhm. And so, what would you say to public interest lawyers who are struggling? What should they be reading? What should they be listening
Mm.
to? What should they be seeing? If this is your gospel, Satish, how do you proselytize? What would you encourage public interest lawyers? That's tailored to them because so much,
Yeah,
and we had this conversation too, so
yeah,
much of what is out there, like so much in our
yeah,
profession, is targeted to law firms or corporate legal departments, which, as you said, it's very
yeah,
clear what the return is. But for these lawyers
yeah,
who are in the community and maybe want to be more
yeah,
in the community or do believe in these issues, what would you recommend they read, listen, and view?
yeah. I mean, I would even go back to law school, and I would say
Mhm.
if you're a public interest law student, let's say there's two types. One type is, okay, I'm sold on AI. I want to learn everything about it. And the second type is, no way, I'm not sure about AI. I think it's scary. I think in either category, the number one thing a law student should do is to take a clinic. And I think those are the skills working in a clinic with real people and real cases. If that's available to you in your law school, do that as much as you can, as many times as you can. If you can take multiple clinics, even better, because those are the skills that AI is not going to be able to replace. Interviewing someone, talking with someone, listening to someone, asking the right questions, formulating a strategy, expressing empathy, understanding the right and wrong of a situation. I think those are invaluable skills. And I think they are not prioritized in most law schools. The clinic is an option that you may take in your second or third year. It should be mandatory and it should be day one, but that's not the way it is. So do that, learn that human skill. And then what should you read? I think you should read everything you can get your hands on. Read about AI native law firms, read about the development of legal technology, read people like Richard Susskind, read Jordan Furlong. He's a journalist in Canada who's been writing about the legal industry for a long time. These are people who, in a way, have seen this coming and they have enough experience to put it in the context that it deserves. I write a Substack as well. You can feel free to read me, but there are many other people as well. In the more technical sense, there are people like Ethan Mollick, who teaches at Penn, and he's been writing about AI for a long time in the larger context of our society. How does it work? What does it mean? How do we coexist with AI? How do we think alongside it without it letting it take over? Um, so there's a lot of stuff and it's continually coming out. There's so much information on this stuff, but just keep your eyes open. I think the worst thing you can do is say, this is not for me. I'm not going to engage with it at all. And hopefully I can still survive. I can still find a job as a lawyer. Because one of the things that is really important is this is going to be part of competence. All lawyers have a duty of competence, rule 1.1. And if we don't engage with AI, probably in a year or two, we're going to be deemed incompetent. We can't meet the standard of competence that's required by the ethical rules, by the model rules, because AI is going to be baked into the way that we work. And Formal Opinion 512, the ABA Formal Opinion talks about this, how we have to kind of grasp and understand this new technology in order to remain competent as attorneys.
So, with all of that in mind, and I'm mindful of time, and we could talk forever. There's so much to talk about. I'm sure I know we haven't even scratched the surface. What would you want people to walk away with at the end of this call? What would be your elevator speech? It could be longer than a sentence. I'll give you a couple more sentences than that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the key takeaway for me is always be curious. We have to be curious about what's happening here. And we have to check our baggage, whatever we bring to the table, be open minded, be willing to engage, because this stuff isn't going away. There is an inevitability to it, unfortunately, which we can't control. And so we've got to make the best of this new technology, this new transformative force that's in our worlds already. And as lawyers, I think we have a duty, not just to the profession, but to our clients to use this to our best goals. And in public interest law, that means the mission. Whatever that mission is that you've decided to take on as a lawyer, um, see how this could impact that mission, help you meet that mission, help you serve more people, maybe help you become obsolete, as we talked about earlier, right? Like, why do we even exist? Maybe we can work towards a world in which we don't need public interest lawyers. The system just works. So that's my charge. I would say, like, just be curious and open minded and see what you can learn, continuously learn and try to improve yourself. And I think you'll do better work and be happier and more fulfilled as well.
Well, Satish, thank you for such an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. I'm sure there was a range of emotions from those listening to this conversation. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for being a part of this important dialogue. The issues we've explored are complex and challenging, but by coming together in spaces like this, we're taking meaningful steps towards progress. Remember, the work doesn't stop here. It continues with the actions we take in our communities, how we educate ourselves, what we read, listen to, and talk about, and within the ABA. I encourage you to stay engaged with the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. Visit our website, explore our upcoming events, and consider one of our committees to help shape the work you're doing. You can do so at ambar.org/CRSJ. Once again, thank you, Satish. The
Thank you.
team behind the scenes, Allie, we appreciate you. And of course, all of you for making the time to be here today. We look forward to seeing you on the next chair chat and continuing this vital work. Thank you.